I shouldn't even be here, the man whispered to himself, tightening his worn jacket against the evening chill as he stared at the golden lights of the Grand Hotel. But sometimes you don't wait for permission to step where you belong. Sometimes you just walk in. His voice cracked slightly, a mix of fear and determination, a rhythm that came from years of being pushed aside, yet refusing to break. His eyes, deep and weathered, carried both shame and courage. To anyone passing, he looked like someone lost. But inside, he knew this was a moment where either he stayed invisible forever or finally let the world see him. The revolving glass doors reflected his dark skin, his tired face, and the dust of the streets still clinging to his shoes. He inhaled deeply, pushing through as if crossing a line no one thought he dared to touch. Inside, chandeliers burned with light so brilliant it almost mocked him. Silk gowns, pressed tuxedos, diamonds sparkling like stars, everything about the room screamed wealth and status. And there he was, a poor black man with nothing in his pockets but a folded note and a heart that refused to shrink. "Excuse me, sir," a sharply dressed security guard stepped forward, cutting off his path. "This event is by invitation only." The man held his ground, even as every eye around began to glance, whispers spreading like fire through dry leaves. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said quietly. "I came to listen, just to listen." "Listen?" Another guard echoed, his tone laced with sarcasm. "You think this is some street performance? Look around. This is the city's most exclusive gala. People pay thousands just to walk through these doors. What makes you think you can just stroll in here?" The man's lips tightened. He wanted to say nothing, to turn back and avoid the humiliation. But then he thought of all the times he had been silenced, all the doors shut in his face simply because of how he looked, where he came from, what he didn't have. Tonight, he couldn't walk away. "I came because sometimes the truth doesn't wait for an invitation," he replied, his voice steady but low. Laughter rippled from a group nearby. A tall man in a white tuxedo, holding a glass of champagne, raised his eyebrows. "What truth could someone like you possibly bring here?" His words cut sharp, each syllable dripping with dismissal. Someone muttered, "Probably looking for free food." More laughter followed. The sting was real, but the man didn't flinch. A woman in a crimson gown leaned closer to her friend, whispering just loud enough for him to hear. "It's embarrassing. They should escort him out before he ruins the evening." The guards moved closer, ready to grab his arm, but the man lifted his hand, surprising them with the quiet authority in the gesture. "If you want me to leave, I will. But let me say one thing first. Just one." The tall man chuckled, waving his champagne flute. "Fine. Entertain us. Make it quick. What could you possibly say that matters here?" The man's voice deepened, carrying more weight now. "You see wealth around you? Gold, diamonds, designer suits. But I see something else. I see people so terrified of losing their shine that they forget where the light comes from. I see fear hiding under arrogance. And I see kindness locked away like it's something shameful." The room shifted. The air thickened. Even those trying to look away found their ears caught by his words. He continued, "I didn't come to eat your food or dance on your marble floor. I came because I've spent my life watching doors like this close before I even knock. And I realized maybe the only way they open is when someone like me walks through and doesn't bow his head." The tall man's smirk faltered slightly, though he tried to hide it. "And who exactly are you to talk about fear and arrogance?" The man's gaze locked on him, unwavering. "I am someone who has slept under bridges you'd never drive across. I've felt hunger gnaw my stomach while people threw leftovers in the trash. I've worked until my hands bled, only to be told I was still not enough. And yet I stand here, not begging, not stealing, but speaking, because sometimes the poorest man in the room carries the richest story." Silence fell heavy. The guards froze mid-step. Even the woman in the crimson gown lowered her eyes for a moment. A waiter passing by paused, tray in hand, his throat tightening at the words. It was as if the man had said aloud the things so many wanted to ignore. But then, another voice rose from the crowd. A younger man, no older than 30, adjusted his cufflinks and sneered. "That's touching, really. But you don't belong here. This is not your world. And the fact that you think walking in uninvited gives you the right to lecture us, well, that's exactly why you should be thrown out." The man's chest rose and fell. He studied the younger man quietly before speaking again. "Belonging isn't written on an invitation card. It's not sewn into the fabric of a tuxedo. Belonging is a choice, yours and mine. And tonight, I chose to belong here. Even if you don't accept me." The younger man scoffed, but his confidence cracked. Around the room, eyes shifted uneasily. Some people avoided looking at the poor man, ashamed of how much truth his words carried. Others stared at him like he was a mirror they'd been afraid to face. He softened his tone, but not his strength. "I don't blame you for looking at me and seeing less. You were raised to measure a person by their shoes, their suit, their wealth. But what if you measured by something else? What if the real test of richness was how wide your heart could open, not how heavy your wallet feels?" The chandelier lights above caught in his eyes, and for a moment he seemed taller, unshaken, almost regal despite the threadbare jacket. The first guard shifted awkwardly, lowering his voice. "Sir, maybe you should let him speak." And just like that, the tide began to turn. The crowd was restless now, torn between curiosity and discomfort. The man's presence had cracked the perfect image of the Gala, like a stone thrown into glass. Some wanted him gone immediately, others couldn't help but listen. The tall man in the white tuxedo set his glass down with a sharp click. "You're clever with words, I'll give you that. But words don't put food on the table. Words don't pay for this room, for these lights. You stand here, in your cheap jacket, trying to shame us as if you understand success. Tell me, what do you know about building anything in this world?" The poor man's eyes flickered, a shadow of memory crossing his face. He took a breath and replied, "More than you think. I once laid bricks with my own hands until they cracked open. I once fixed roofs in the summer heat, not for recognition, not for wealth, but so children could sleep without rain falling on their faces. I carried crates in markets, pulled carts down streets, did jobs most people here wouldn't touch. Every single brick, every nail, every drop of sweat, that is building something. Not for me, but for others." A murmur spread through the hall. Some heads tilted. A man in the back muttered, "I had workers like him once. Never thought about what they carried." The younger man with the cufflinks smirked again, though his voice wavered slightly. "So, what? You're a martyr now? A hero because you did what poor people do? You should have worked harder, saved, invested. Then maybe you'd be here properly instead of sneaking in like a thief." The poor man turned toward him slowly. His voice was low, but it pierced the room. "I worked harder than you can imagine, but sometimes life takes what you build, no matter how tightly you hold it. I had a family once, a wife, a little girl with the brightest laugh. Every coin I earned went to them. But sickness doesn't ask how much money you have. And when the hospital turned us away because we couldn't pay enough, I watched the light leave my daughter's eyes while the world kept moving. Tell me, is that because I didn't work hard enough? Or because people like you decide who deserves to live and who doesn't?" The room fell silent, suffocating under the weight of his words. A woman at a nearby table pressed her hand to her mouth, eyes watering. Even the tall man shifted uncomfortably, his arrogance thinning. The poor man's voice cracked now, but he didn't stop. After that, nothing mattered. I lost my wife soon after. She couldn't carry the weight. And I was left with nothing but memories and empty hands. But I kept working. I kept moving. Because I realized if I gave up too, then all the struggle, all the pain was for nothing. That's why I'm here. Not because I wanted your food. Not because I wanted to dress like you. I'm here to remind you, every life that looks small in your eyes carries a story larger than this entire room. The first guard's throat tightened. He stepped back slightly, unable to keep his composure. A waiter set his tray down quietly, as if the words had pinned him to the floor. The younger man clenched his fists. You think your pain gives you the right to speak like this? Everyone suffers. You're not special. You're just another man who failed to rise. The poor man's gaze softened, though his words cut deeper than before. You're right. I failed to rise in the way you measure success. But maybe the only real failure is to forget compassion while you rise. Maybe the true height of a man is not how far above others he climbs, but how many he lifts when they fall. That is something you can't buy with all the wealth in this room. The tall man's lips parted, as if to reply, but no words came. He looked around, realizing eyes were turning, not to him, but to the man he had mocked only moments ago. A woman in pearls whispered, "He's right. When did we become so afraid of kindness?" The poor man turned slowly, letting his eyes meet the crowd one by one. I see you staring, some with pity, some with judgment. But ask yourself this. What is pity worth if it doesn't move you to act? What is judgment worth if it blinds you to truth? You think I don't belong here because I have no money, no suit, no invitation? But maybe I belong here more than anyone, because I've learned what true wealth is. It's not these chandeliers or champagne. It's the strength to keep standing when the world tries to bury you. It's the courage to speak when silence would be easier. It's the heart that refuses to let hate be the only voice in the room. The chandeliers seemed to shine differently now, less like symbols of power, more like fragile glass reflecting something deeper. The tall man shook his head slowly, struggling to regain control. Fine words, but this is a gala for leaders, innovators, people who change the world. You're just a man with a story. That's not enough. The poor man's jaw tightened, but his eyes burned with quiet fire. A story is more than enough. Stories build bridges where walls divide. Stories heal wounds that wealth cannot touch. Stories change hearts, and hearts change the world. So tell me, what greater power is there than a story that reminds you of your own humanity? The room erupted. Not in laughter this time, but in whispers that carried awe, doubt, reflection. People were no longer looking at him as an intruder. They were listening as if he had unlocked something buried inside them. The younger man slammed his hand against the table, frustration spilling out. This is ridiculous. Why are we listening to him? Throw him out! But before the guards could move, an older woman stood up, her silver hair shimmering in the light. She raised her voice, steady and calm. No, let him stay. I've attended galas like this for 50 years, and I've never heard words that mattered more than his tonight. A hush spread. The younger man froze, glaring but powerless. The poor man lowered his head slightly, humbled. I didn't come here to divide. I came because I knew if I stayed outside, nothing would change. Sometimes one voice is all it takes to remind others of what they've forgotten. And in that moment, something undeniable shifted. The gala was no longer the same. The room held its breath. For the first time that evening, the chandeliers above didn't feel like symbols of separation. They felt like silent witnesses to something greater than wealth. The poor man stood there, not taller in body, but towering in spirit. The younger man in cufflinks clenched his jaw, refusing to let go of his anger. So what now? Are we supposed to applaud you? Hand you a seat at our table because you spoke a few sad words? The poor man's eyes softened, though his voice carried steel. I don't want your table, I don't want your applause. What I want, what I hope, is that when you walk out of here tonight, you remember what it feels like to be human. Strip away the suits, the diamonds, the invitations, and what's left? Just people. People who bleed, who break, who dream. People who can choose every day to make life heavier for others or lighter. An older man in the back, silent until now, suddenly rose to his feet. His voice trembled but rang true. I came here tonight to network, to talk business. But I'll leave remembering you. Because somewhere along the way, I forgot. I forgot that the reason I built my company was to help people, not to step over them. Gasps rippled through the crowd as more faces softened, shoulders lowered, masks of pride slipping. The woman in the crimson gown, who had whispered cruelly before, stood slowly. Her hands shook slightly as she spoke. I judged you the second you walked through those doors. Not because I knew you, but because I feared what you reminded me of. My father grew up poor. He worked harder than anyone I've known, but I buried that part of him because it embarrassed me. You reminded me tonight of what I should never have forgotten. The poor man turned toward her gently. It's not too late to remember. The younger man scoffed, his voice sharp, though thinner now. You've turned this into some sob story circus. But stories don't change the world. Money does. Power does. The poor man stepped closer, closing the distance until only a few feet separated them. His eyes locked onto the younger man's with unshakable calm. Power fades, money disappears, but the way you make someone feel, whether small, broken, lifted, or whole, that stays long after the numbers in your bank vanish. Ask anyone who has lost someone they love. They won't remember the cars, the mansions, the glitter. They'll remember words. They'll remember kindness, or the absence of it. The younger man faltered, his lips parting, but no argument escaping. His eyes darted around the room, finding no allies left. The same people who had laughed before now looked at him with quiet disappointment. The tall man in the white tuxedo sighed, lowering his head. His voice was low but sincere. Maybe we all needed this. Maybe we needed someone who had nothing to remind us of everything. The poor man gave a small nod, his shoulders easing. I didn't come here to shame you. I came here because too many nights I stood outside doors like this and wondered if the world inside remembered the world outside. Tonight, maybe it does. The older woman with silver hair spoke again, her tone firm yet warm. You have a place here, son. Not because of what you wear or what you own, but because of what you carry in your soul. You've given us more tonight than all the speeches lined up for this gala combined. Applause began. Not the shallow kind given to please, but the raw, genuine kind that starts small and grows until the walls shake with it. People stood one by one, clapping, some with tears in their eyes, some with smiles breaking through the weight of pride. The poor man lowered his gaze, humbled, and whispered to himself, I didn't come here for this, but maybe this is what was meant to be. He turned toward the doors, ready to leave, but the older man called out, Wait! Stay! Share your story with us! Tonight you belong as much as anyone. The poor man paused, then smiled faintly. Belonging isn't about staying in the room. It's about leaving a piece of yourself behind. I think I've done that. And with that, he walked out. Not thrown out, not mocked, but honored in silence that carried louder than any cheer. Outside, the night air hit his face, cool and steady. He lifted his head toward the stars and whispered, For you, my little girl. For you. The story closed there, but its echo lingered in every listener's heart, like a bell that refused to stop ringing. And here's what it means for us, in our own daily lives. How often do we walk past someone and dismiss them based on what they wear, where they stand, or what they don't have? How often do we measure worth by wealth instead of character? That man at the gala reminded everyone, and reminds us too, that greatness isn't in the glitter of chandeliers, but in the quiet courage to see humanity where others refuse to look. Remember this: one act of kindness, one word of respect, can change the entire course of someone's life. And that's the truth that sticks. When you leave this video and walk into your own world, ask yourself, will I be the one who closes the door or the one who opens it? Because in the end, the poorest man in the room carried the richest story. If this story touched you, don't just keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Drop a comment below about what you're taking away from this story, and let's talk about it together. And if you want more powerful, real stories like this one, subscribe to Black Saga right now. Hit the like button and help us spread this message further.